The morning sun rose red over New Eden, casting long shadows across the wheat fields that stretched to the horizon. Sarah Martinez walked through the crops, her boots crunching on the frost-covered ground. She had been born on this world 23 years ago, and like most colonists, she had never seen Earth. New Eden was home. It was all she knew. The colony had grown from a small outpost to a thriving world of over 2 million people. Children played in the streets of Eden City, while their parents worked in the fields or the factories. Schools taught both human history and the new ways of farming alien soil. The colonists had built something beautiful here, something worth protecting. Captain James Knox stood on the observation deck of the orbital defense station, watching the planet turn slowly below. The station was small, equipped with basic sensors and a few defensive weapons. Nothing fancy. New Eden was far from any known threats, sitting quietly on the edge of human space. The most exciting thing that happened here was the monthly supply ship from Earth. Knox had requested more defenses several times. The colonial government always said the same thing. Who would attack a farming world? We grow food, not weapons. Knox understood their point, but something in his gut told him to be careful. Space was big and full of unknowns. Down in the colony's main school, 8-year-old Tommy Chen was learning about the stars. His teacher, Mrs. Peterson, pointed to a map showing all the human worlds scattered across this part of the galaxy. New Eden was a tiny dot on the edge, far from the bright cluster of core worlds where Earth sat. Are there other people out there? Tommy asked. People who aren't human? Mrs. Peterson smiled. Yes, Tommy. There are many different kinds of people in the galaxy. Most of them are friendly. Some prefer to keep to themselves. That's why we stay in our part of space and let them stay in theirs. Tommy nodded and went back to his drawing. He was sketching the farmhouse where he lived with his parents and little sister. In his picture, the sky was always blue and the sun always shined. He had never seen a cloudy day on New Eden. Far across the galaxy, Admiral Zektar of the Kythera hegemony studied the intelligence reports on his desk. The humans had been expanding for decades, settling world after world. Their growth was fast and aggressive. Too fast for the Kythera's liking. The Kythera were an old race, proud and careful. They had ruled this section of space for thousands of years, before humans even learned to make fire. Now these young upstarts were spreading everywhere, claiming systems that the Kythera considered their territory. The humans must be stopped, Zektar's aide said. They grow stronger every year. Zektar nodded. The hegemony had tried diplomatic contact, but humans were stubborn. They listened politely and then did whatever they wanted anyway. They were like children who refused to learn proper behavior. We will teach them respect, Zektar decided. One sharp lesson. They will understand that this galaxy belongs to its rightful masters. The Kythera fleet was magnificent. 27 warships, each one larger than anything in the human navy. Their hulls gleamed silver in the starlight, and their weapons could crack a planet's crust. The hegemony had built this fleet over centuries, perfecting every system. Zektar chose New Eden carefully. It was isolated, poorly defended, and full of civilians. The perfect target to send a message. When the humans saw what happened to a world that dared to exist in Kythera space, they would pack up and retreat to their tiny core worlds. The fleet jumped through hyperspace in perfect formation. Their destination was 3 days away. On New Eden, life continued as normal. Farmers tended their crops. Children went to school. Captain Knox filed his daily reports and worried about things that might never happen. The colonists had no idea that death was racing toward them through the darkness between stars. Dr. Elena Vasquez was in her laboratory when the first energy readings appeared on her instruments. She was studying the planet's magnetic field, boring work that kept the weather satellites running properly. The readings didn't make sense at first. Too much energy in the wrong places. She checked her equipment twice, then called Captain Knox. I'm getting some strange readings up here. Could be solar interference, but it looks like something big coming out of hyperspace. Knox was in the station's command center 30 seconds later. The main screen showed empty space, but the sensors were going crazy. Energy signatures like nothing they had ever seen before. Could be a new type of supply ship, Knox said, but he didn't believe it. He activated the emergency beacon and sent a message to Earth. Standard procedure for anything unusual. The Kythera fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Eden system. 27 ships appeared in a perfect battle formation, their weapons already charging. Admiral Zektar looked at the peaceful blue world on his screen and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Open communications," he ordered. "Let them know why they are about to die." The message reached New Eden's orbital station first. Captain Knox listened to the alien voice speaking in perfect English. "People of Earth, you have trespassed in territory belonging to the Kythera hegemony. This world exists in violation of natural law. You will be removed." Knox hit the emergency alert. Every siren on New Eden began to wail. Colonial defense forces scrambled their few fighters. The orbital defense platforms powered up their weapons. It wasn't nearly enough, and everyone knew it. Down on the planet, parents grabbed their children and ran for the underground shelters. But New Eden had been built for farming, not for war. The shelters were too small and too few. Most people just stood in the streets, looking up at the sky and wondering what was happening. Tommy Chen was still in school when the sirens started. Mrs. Peterson tried to keep the children calm, but she was terrified herself. Through the classroom window, Tommy could see bright lights appearing in the sky. They looked like new stars being born. The Kythera fleet moved closer to the planet. Their weapons locked onto every human structure they could find. Cities, farms, the orbital station, even the tiny defense platforms that posed no real threat. "Begin the cleansing," Admiral Zektar commanded. The bombardment started without warning. Streams of energy lanced down from space, each one hot enough to turn rock into glass. The orbital station died first. Captain Knox and his crew vaporized in an instant of white light. The defense platforms followed, exploding like tiny suns. Then the real destruction began. The Kythera targeted the cities first. Eden City disappeared in a flash that could be seen from orbit. The smaller settlements followed, each one erased by a single shot from the alien fleet. Tommy Chen was holding Mrs. Peterson's hand when the light came. He had just enough time to ask, "Why is the sky burning?" before the classroom became part of the expanding fireball that had once been his home. The bombardment continued for 3 hours. When it was finished, New Eden was nothing but molten glass and radioactive dust. 2,300,000 human beings had been reduced to atoms. Not a single structure remained standing. Not a single person had survived. Admiral Zektar studied the glowing ruins on his screen. The lesson was complete. Soon the humans would receive word of what had happened here. They would understand that the galaxy belonged to older, stronger races. They would retreat and never bother the Kythera again. The fleet jumped back into hyperspace, leaving only silence behind. In the darkness of space, a single automated beacon continued to broadcast. It had been launched from the orbital station in the final moments before destruction. The message was simple: New Eden destroyed. No survivors. Remember us. The beacon's signal would take weeks to reach the nearest human world. When it did, everything would change. The message from New Eden reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. Communications Officer Lisa Park was drinking coffee and reading routine reports when her screen lit up with an emergency beacon. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Emergency beacons were for pirates or equipment failures, not total planetary destruction. She played the message 3 times before calling her supervisor. The automated distress signal was clear but impossible to believe. New Eden destroyed. No survivors. Remember us. The timestamp showed it had been sent 17 days ago. Whatever had happened was already over. Director William Hayes arrived at the communication center within an hour. He was a calm man who had handled dozens of colonial emergencies, but his hands shook as he listened to the beacon's final transmission. A child's voice asking why the sky was burning, then nothing but static. "Get me a visual confirmation," Hayes ordered. "Use the deep space telescopes. I need to know what happened out there." The images took 6 hours to process. When they appeared on the main screen, every person in the room went silent. New Eden was gone. Not damaged, not conquered, completely erased. The entire planet glowed like a dying star. Its surface turned to glass by weapons beyond human understanding. President Sarah Chen sat in the Oval Office, staring at the photographs spread across her desk. Each image showed the same thing: a world of over 2 million people reduced to a ball of molten rock. Her military advisors spoke in quiet voices about alien technology and unprovoked attacks, but she could barely hear them. "Who did this?" she asked finally. General Harrison placed a tablet on her desk. According to the beacon's final transmission, something called the Kythera hegemony. "We've never heard of them before. No diplomatic contact, no warnings, nothing. President Chen studied the alien ship designs captured by New Eden's sensors in their final moments. The vessels were huge and obviously powerful. More importantly, they had killed human children. She felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. "Get me Admiral Rodriguez," she said, "and activate the Emergency Council. I want every colony administrator, every fleet commander, and every defense minister in a secure conference within 12 hours. The news spread through human space like wildfire. On Luna, factory workers stopped their machines and stood in silence. On Mars, the Colonial Assembly declared 3 days of mourning. On distant frontier worlds, farmers put down their tools and looked up at the stars with new fear. But something else was happening too. Something the aliens hadn't expected. Instead of panic, there was a growing anger. Instead of retreat, there was talk of justice. The humans weren't running away. They were getting ready to fight. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez commanded the Colonial Defense Force from her flagship orbiting Earth. She was 60 years old, a veteran of the Centauri Rebellion and the Asteroid Pirates Wars. She had never seen anything like the destruction of New Eden, but she had seen enough war to know what needed to happen next. "Signal all fleet commands," she ordered. "Condition red, full mobilization. Every ship, every crew, every reserve unit. I want our complete order of battle within 48 hours. Her aide looked worried. "Admiral, that's over 3,000 vessels. The logistics alone will be handled." Rodriguez cut him off. "The Kythera wanted to send us a message. We're going to send one back." Across human space, military bases came alive with activity. Mothballed ships were pulled from storage and refitted with the latest weapons. Reserve crews reported for duty. Civilian shipyards received new orders for warships instead of cargo haulers. On industrial worlds, factories switched from making farming equipment to building missiles. Mining operations doubled their output to feed the growing war machine. Even the peaceful inner colonies began producing components for weapons they had never wanted to build. The transformation was remarkable and terrifying. In 3 days, humanity revealed the true size of their military capability. What the galaxy had seen before was just the peacetime fleet, a fraction of what humans could put in space when they were serious about fighting. Dr. Marcus Webb worked in a classified facility beneath the mountains of Colorado. For 20 years, he had led the Prometheus Protocol project, humanity's ultimate insurance policy. It was supposed to be theoretical, a safeguard that would never be needed. Now President Chen's authorization codes glowed on his screen. "Are you sure about this?" his assistant asked. "Once we activate Prometheus, there's no going back." Webb looked at the images from New Eden one more time. 2 million people, including thousands of children, murdered without warning or mercy. "Yes," he said. "Start the sequence." Deep in the mountain, machines that had never been used began to wake up. Artificial intelligences designed for one purpose only: total war. Manufacturing systems capable of building an entire fleet in weeks. Weapons that existed only in theory but could become reality with the push of a button. The Prometheus Protocol was humanity's answer to extinction. It was everything they could build, everything they could imagine, everything they could become if survival was the only goal. It had been created after first contact, when humans realized they were not alone and might not be welcome. Now it was coming online for the first time. Intelligence reports flowed into Earth from across the galaxy. Human spies and diplomats gathered information about the Kythera hegemony with new urgency. The picture that emerged was disturbing. An old, powerful empire that considered humans to be trespassers in their galaxy. The Kythera controlled over 200 star systems and commanded massive fleets. They had fought wars before, always winning through superior technology and overwhelming force. They believed in their right to rule and saw other species as servants or obstacles. But the intelligence reports also revealed something important. The Kythera had never fought anyone like humanity. Their previous enemies had been single worlds or small alliances. They had never faced an entire species united in fury. On the frontier world of Kepler Station, Governor Martinez received sealed orders from Earth. She read them twice before calling her security chief. "Implement Protocol 7, she said quietly. "Full evacuation to the core worlds. No one stays behind." Similar orders went out to every human world within 100 light-years of Kythera space. Civilians were moved to safety while military personnel took their places. Entire colonies became armed camps overnight. Supply depots became weapons factories. Peaceful settlements became forward bases for the coming war. The Kythera had expected the humans to retreat to their core worlds and beg for mercy. Instead, they were building a wall of steel and fire along the entire border. Every approach to human space was being fortified with weapons, mines, and automated defense platforms. But the most ominous sign was the silence. For the first time since humans had entered the galaxy, their communication networks went dark. No trade ships launched from human ports. No diplomatic messages were sent to other species. No civilian traffic moved between the colonies. It was as if an entire species had stopped breathing. The last transmission to leave human space was a single message broadcast on all frequencies. It was President Chen speaking directly to the Kythera leadership. "You have murdered our children. You have destroyed our home. You wanted to teach us our place in this galaxy. Today we teach you yours." Then the silence returned deeper than before. In the depths of space, automated factories began building ships designed for one purpose: to make the Kythera pay for New Eden. They were ugly vessels with no comfort features and minimal life support. They existed only to carry weapons to their targets and return home if possible. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the reports flow in from across human space. 3,000 ships had become 5,000, then 10,000. Military analysts had stopped counting after 15,000 vessels reported ready for combat. "Admiral," her communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving surrender requests." Rodriguez looked up in surprise. "From the Kythera?" "No, ma'am. From other species. They're asking us not to attack them. They want to declare neutrality in our war with the Kythera." Rodriguez almost smiled. Word was spreading through the galaxy about humanity's mobilization. Other species were starting to understand what the Kythera had awakened. They wanted no part of the coming storm. "Acknowledge their neutrality," she ordered, "but make it clear. Anyone who helps the Kythera in any way will share their fate." The message was simple and direct. Humanity was going to war and they didn't plan to lose. Anyone who stood with their enemies would burn alongside them. In his private office on Earth, President Chen stared at intelligence reports about Kythera worlds. Beautiful planets with ancient cities and billions of inhabitants. Many of them were civilians who had nothing to do with the attack on New Eden. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she remembered Tommy Chen's voice asking why the sky was burning. The boy had been named after her grandfather. She had held him as a baby during her last visit to New Eden. The Kythera had chosen to make this a war of extinction. Humanity would give them exactly what they wanted. The first human strike came without warning. The Kythera border world of Velnash was a fortress system, heavily defended with orbital platforms and patrol fleets. Admiral Kethmore commanded the defenses from his massive battle station, confident that no enemy could break through their shields. He was reviewing reports from New Eden when his sensors detected something impossible. 300 human ships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The vessels were unlike anything in the Kythera databases. Angular, brutal designs covered in weapon mounts and armor plating. "Signal the human fleet," Kethmore ordered. "Demand their surrender." The reply came instantly. For New Eden, the battle lasted 14 minutes. The human ships moved like a single organism, their formation flowing around Kythera defenses with deadly precision. Their weapons were primitive but devastating. Kinetic rounds and nuclear missiles fired in overwhelming numbers. The Kythera fought back with energy beams and plasma cannons, but the humans absorbed the damage and kept coming. When their shields failed, they used their hulls as shields. When their hulls cracked, they used the wreckage as weapons. Admiral Kethmore's battle station died last, its massive frame torn apart by focused fire from 50 human cruisers. As the station exploded, the Admiral had one final thought. These humans fought like they had nothing to lose. The human fleet regrouped after the battle, but they didn't celebrate their victory. Instead, they broadcast a simple message to every Kythera frequency. One down, hundreds to go. Remember New Eden. Then they jumped back into hyperspace, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and radiation. News of Velnash's destruction reached the Kythera capital within hours. Admiral Zektar studied the battle reports with growing concern. The humans had lost 30 ships in the attack, but they had fought with a ferocity that shocked him. No tactical retreats, no attempts to preserve their forces. They seemed willing to die as long as they took Kythera with them. Perhaps we should offer to negotiate, his aide suggested. The destruction of one world should be enough to satisfy their honor. Zektar shook his head. Honor has nothing to do with this. The humans want blood. They won't stop until they get it, he was right. Even as they spoke, human fleets were striking at Kythera positions across the border. The attacks followed no military logic. Instead of targeting strategic positions, they hit every Kythera military asset they could find. Shipyards, training facilities, supply depots, all were destroyed with ruthless efficiency. The human tactics were unlike anything the Kythera had faced before. They didn't try to hold ground or establish supply lines. They appeared, destroyed everything military in the system, then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. It was warfare as extermination, not conquest. On Earth, the Prometheus Protocol factories worked around the clock. Dr. Webb watched massive assembly lines producing ships, weapons and ammunition at rates that should have been impossible. The AI systems optimized every process, finding efficiencies that human engineers had never imagined. Production rate is exceeding projections by 300%, his assistant reported. At this rate, we'll have more ships than trained crews to fly them. Webb smiled grimly. That's already been solved. The AI can fly them just fine. It was true. The new vessels rolling off the production lines needed minimal human crews. Advanced computer systems handled navigation, targeting, and tactical decisions. Humans were there mainly to make the final choice about pulling the trigger. President Chen visited one of the factories hidden beneath Luna's surface. She walked through kilometers of assembly lines where machines built instruments of war with mechanical precision. The scale was overwhelming. Millions of tons of warships taking shape every day. How many can we build? She asked Dr. Webb. As many as we need, he replied. The only limit is raw materials, and we're already strip mining entire asteroid belts to feed the machines. Chen nodded. The Kythera had wanted to teach humanity about power. They were about to get an education. Admiral Rodriguez commanded the growing human fleet from her mobile headquarters, a massive vessel that could coordinate thousands of ships across multiple star systems. Her staff worked in shifts around the clock, planning attacks and analyzing enemy responses. The Kythera are trying to concentrate their forces, her chief of staff reported. They're pulling back from frontier positions to defend their core worlds. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. Red markers showed Kythera positions, while blue markers represented human fleets. The blue markers were spreading like an infection, surrounding and isolating enemy forces. Good, she said. Let them concentrate. It will make them easier to destroy. The human strategy was simple and brutal. They would eliminate every Kythera military asset, starting with the weakest positions and working their way up to the heavily defended core worlds. No Kythera soldier would be allowed to surrender. No Kythera ship would be permitted to retreat. It was total war, and humanity intended to win. The second phase of human attacks began with simultaneous strikes on 12 Kythera systems. The aliens had learned from Velnash and prepared better defenses, but it didn't matter. Human fleets simply brought more ships and more weapons. At the Battle of Tremar, the Kythera gathered 400 vessels to defend their major shipyard. The humans arrived with 800 ships and support craft. The battle raged for 6 hours before the last Kythera defender was destroyed. At Zolveth, the aliens tried to use the planet's population as human shields, threatening to bombard civilian areas if the humans attacked. The human fleet commander's response was broadcast on all frequencies. The Kythera forfeited any right to mercy when they murdered our children. All Kythera military assets will be destroyed. The orbital bombardment platforms were eliminated with surgical precision, while the civilian areas remained untouched. It was a demonstration of both human capability and human restraint. They could have destroyed the entire planet, but chose to limit their violence to military targets. The Kythera began to understand that they were facing something beyond their experience. These humans didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought for revenge, and they would accept any cost to achieve it. Other galactic powers watched the war with growing alarm. The Terran Empire, which had always considered itself the galaxy's dominant military force, quietly began reinforcing their borders with human space. The peaceful Altarian Federation sent diplomatic messages offering to mediate between the warring species. The human response to all diplomatic overtures was the same. Justice for New Eden must be served. After that we can talk. But humanity's military buildup was revealing something that shocked the galaxy. What other species had seen as human defense forces were merely a fraction of their true capability. Hidden shipyards and secret factories were producing vessels that outclassed most alien designs. The cargo ships that had carried human trade goods were revealed to be Q-ships, merchant vessels with concealed weapons. The exploration craft that had mapped new systems turned out to be scouts for a military machine that spanned hundreds of worlds. Even human civilian technology was being weaponized. Mining equipment became planet crackers. Construction robots became assault units. Passenger ships became troop transports. Everything humans had built for peace was being turned to war. Ambassador Velthar of the Galactic Council met with President Chen in an emergency session. The ambassador was a respected diplomat who had mediated conflicts for centuries, but he seemed nervous as he spoke. President Chen, the Council is deeply concerned about the scale of your military response. The Kythera attack was tragic, but this level of retaliation threatens galactic stability. Chen looked at him with cold eyes. The Kythera killed over 2 million of my people, including children. They did it without warning, without mercy, without cause. Tell me, Ambassador, what would your people do if someone murdered 2 million of your children? Velthar had no answer. In truth, most species would have sued for peace after losing a single world. The idea of fighting a war of extinction was alien to them. They didn't understand that humans saw New Eden not as a tactical loss, but as a crime that demanded absolute justice. The Council offers to mediate, Velthar said finally. Surely some accommodation can be reached. There will be no accommodation, Chen replied. The Kythera will surrender unconditionally or they will cease to exist. Those are the only options. The ambassador left Earth knowing that he had failed. Humanity was beyond negotiation. They had chosen total war, and they had the power to wage it. In space, human fleets continued their methodical destruction of Kythera forces. Every day brought new victories and new demonstrations of human military might. The aliens, who had thought themselves masters of the galaxy, were being systematically destroyed by a species they had considered primitive. Admiral Zektar sat in his command center on the Kythera homeworld, watching red markers disappear from his tactical display. Each marker represented ships, bases, or entire fleets that had been eliminated by human forces. The rate of loss was increasing every day. Perhaps we underestimated them, his aide said quietly. Zektar nodded grimly. The humans had revealed themselves to be everything the Kythera feared, fast, aggressive, and utterly ruthless when threatened. The war had been raging for 6 months when humanity revealed the true scope of their anger. It wasn't enough to destroy Kythera military forces. Every system that had supported the attack on New Eden would pay a price. Admiral Rodriguez stood before the assembled fleet commanders in the secure briefing room aboard her flagship. The holographic display showed the entire galaxy, with red zones marking Kythera territory and yellow zones indicating their allies and trading partners. Phase 3 begins now, she announced. Total economic isolation of the Kythera hegemony. Any world that trades with them, any species that provides them supplies, any government that offers them sanctuary will face immediate consequences. Commander Sarah Kim raised her hand. Admiral, that includes 17 neutral species and dozens of trading worlds. Some of them have never even heard of New Eden. Rodriguez's expression didn't change. They'll hear about it now. The Kythera chose to make this a war of extermination. We're simply accommodating their wishes. The human blockade was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Thousands of ships took position along every major trade route leading to Kythera space. Nothing was allowed through. No food shipments, no medical supplies, no raw materials. The aliens who had destroyed New Eden would be allowed to starve. The Beltari Confederacy was the first to protest. They had traded with the Kythera for centuries and considered the humans' demands unreasonable. Ambassador Yelton sent angry messages to Earth, demanding that the blockade be lifted immediately. President Chen's response was delivered by a human battle fleet that appeared in the Beltari capital system. The lead ship broadcast a simple message. You have 24 hours to cease all trade with the Kythera hegemony. After that, we will consider you a combatant. The Beltari fleet moved to intercept the human vessels, confident in their superior numbers. They had 60 ships against only 12 human cruisers. The battle lasted 8 minutes. When it was over, the entire Beltari navy was floating debris. and the human ships had barely taken damage. The surviving Beltari leadership agreed to end their trade with the Cathara within hours. Similar demonstrations occurred across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Mining Consortium tried to run the blockade with armed cargo ships. They were destroyed without warning. The Theta Republic attempted to send humanitarian aid to Cathara civilians. The relief ships were vaporized by human interceptors. The message was clear. Anyone who helped the Cathara in any way would share their fate. But humanity's war doctrine was evolving in ways that terrified other species. The humans weren't just fighting the Cathara, they were systematically dismantling everything that had made the attack on New Eden, possible intelligence agencies that had provided information about human colonies were infiltrated and destroyed. Weapons manufacturers that had sold technology to the Cathara found their facilities bombed by untraceable ships. Even neutral worlds that had simply hosted Cathara diplomats received visits from human trade representatives carrying barely concealed threats. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had survived the destruction of New Eden by being on a research ship in deep space, now served as humanity's chief interrogator of captured Cathara personnel. Her methods were perfectly legal but psychologically devastating. "Tell me about the planning for New Eden," she said to Admiral Kethvar, the highest-ranking Kithra prisoner. "Who gave the orders? Who provided the intelligence? Who built the ships?" Kethvar remained silent, but his neural patterns were being recorded by human scanning equipment. Every thought, every memory, every emotion was being catalogued and analyzed. When the session was over, humans would know more about Cathara military structure than many Cathara officers. "Your silence is irrelevant," Dr. Vasquez told him. "We'll have the information anyway. The only question is whether you help us or we take it." The intelligence gathered from captured Cathara revealed the full scope of the conspiracy behind New Eden's destruction. It hadn't been a spontaneous decision. It was the result of months of planning involving dozens of Cathara military officers and government officials. President Shen read the interrogation reports with growing fury. The attack hadn't been motivated by territorial disputes or strategic concerns. The Cathara had simply decided that humans were growing too fast and needed to be culled. New Eden was chosen because it was isolated and defensible, a perfect target for genocide. "They planned to kill every human on that world from the beginning," she told her cabinet. 2 million people, including children, murdered for the crime of existing in a galaxy the Cathara considered their property. The revelations changed the nature of the war. What had begun as revenge for a single atrocity became something larger, a reckoning for an entire philosophy of galactic domination. The Cathara believed in their right to determine which species could live and which should die. Humanity was going to teach them the consequences of that belief. The fortress world of Kethmor had guarded the Kithra inner systems for 1,000 years. Its defenses were legendary: orbital battle stations, planetary shields, and a garrison of 50,000 elite troops. No enemy had ever breached its perimeter. The human fleet that arrived at Kethmor consisted of 1,200 vessels, supported by automated weapons platforms and AI-controlled attack drones. The battle lasted for 18 hours and became a textbook example of human military doctrine. They didn't try to break through the defenses. Instead, they surrounded the planet and began a systematic bombardment of every military installation. The Cathara shields held at first, but human weapons were designed for sustained fire. Hour after hour, the barriers weakened under constant assault. When the shields finally collapsed, the humans didn't invade. They simply continued the bombardment until every gun emplacement, every bunker, every military facility was reduced to molten slag. The garrison was given one chance to surrender. When they refused, they were buried in the ruins of their fortress. The destruction of Kethmor was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Other species watched in horror as humanity demonstrated their new approach to warfare. They didn't conquer worlds, they sterilized them of all military presence. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from 100 species gathered to discuss the growing human threat. Many demanded action to stop what they called humanity's rampage across civilized space. Council President Mortak was a wise leader who had guided galactic politics for decades. He listened to the debates and complaints before speaking. The humans are not targeting civilians. They are not conquering territory. They are responding to an unprovoked genocide with military action. What exactly would you have them do? Ambassador Yeltesh of the Vorthan Alliance stood to speak. They've blockaded half the galaxy. They're destroying anyone who opposes them. This isn't justice, it's imperialism. Mortak's response was quiet but devastating. The Kithara killed 2 million human civilians without warning or cause. If someone did that to your people, Ambassador, what would your response be? The chamber fell silent. Every species present knew the answer. Most of them would have surrendered after losing a single world. The fact that humans were still fighting after 6 months of warfare was unprecedented in galactic history. The humans have shown remarkable restraint, Mortak continued. They could have declared war on everyone who ever traded with the Kithara. They could have targeted civilian populations in retaliation for New Eden. Instead, they limit their violence to military targets and those who actively support their enemies. Ambassador Velthar raised a tentative hand. What about negotiation? Surely some compromise is possible. Mortak played an audio recording, President Chen's voice speaking to the council months earlier. Justice for New Eden must be served. After that we can talk. The humans have been clear about their terms, Mortak said. Unconditional surrender by the Kithara hegemony, followed by trials for those responsible for the genocide. Those are not unreasonable demands. But the Kithara were not ready to surrender. Their pride prevented them from accepting defeat at the hands of a species they considered inferior. Admiral Zektar convinced the hegemony council to authorize the use of their ultimate weapon, planet-killer devices that could destroy entire worlds. The weapons were ancient artifacts from the Kithara's early wars, powerful enough to crack a planet's core and trigger a supernova-level explosion. They had never been used against inhabited worlds, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The first planet killer was deployed at the human colony of Avalon, a world with 3 million civilians. The weapon was detected by human sensors days before it could fire, and the response was swift and brutal. The Kithara facility that had launched the planet killer was obliterated by a human strike force within hours. Every Kithara world within 50 light-years was subjected to enhanced interrogation, until the location of the remaining weapons was revealed. Then humanity did something that shocked even their enemies. Instead of destroying the planet-killer devices, they captured them intact and reverse-engineered the technology. Within weeks, human scientists had not only duplicated the weapons but improved them. The message sent to the Kithara leadership was simple. You tried to destroy our worlds. Now we have the power to destroy yours. Choose wisely. Admiral Zektar realized that his species had made a tour. The surrender came on a cold morning exactly 1 year after the destruction of New Eden. Admiral Zektar stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the human fleet surrounding his homeworld. 3,000 human vessels waited in perfect formation, their weapons powered down but ready to fire at a moment's notice. President Chen received the surrender documents in a ceremony aboard Admiral Rodriguez's flagship. Representatives from across the galaxy watched as the once mighty Kithara hegemony formally ceased to exist. The terms were exactly what humanity had demanded: unconditional surrender and complete cooperation with war crimes trials. The Kithara military is hereby disbanded. President Chen read from the surrender document. All Kithara military personnel will be processed for potential war crimes. All Kithara weapons and ships are forfeit to human forces. All Kithara worlds will be placed under human administration until a new civilian government can be established. Admiral Zektar signed the documents with shaking hands. His empire was gone, his fleets destroyed, his people conquered, all because he had thought it would be easy to kill a few million humans and send the rest running home. But the end of the war brought unexpected challenges for humanity. They had won a complete victory, but victory came with responsibilities they hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, they controlled 200 star systems and billions of alien civilians who needed food, medicine, and basic services. Dr. Marcus Webb found himself in charge of the Transition Authority, tasked with managing former Kithara worlds. It was a job he had never wanted and wasn't trained for. The Prometheus Protocol had been designed to win wars, not govern conquered territories. What do we do with them all? His assistant asked, looking at reports from Kithara civilian populations across the galaxy. We can't keep entire species under military occupation forever. Webb studied the intelligence reports on his desk. Most Kithara civilians had had nothing to do with the attack on New Eden. They were farmers, workers, Teachers, ordinary people who had simply been born in the wrong empire at the wrong time. We help them build something better, he decided. Democracy, human rights, the rule of law. Everything their old government denied them. It was easier said than done. Many Kythera couldn't understand why their conquerors were providing food and medical care instead of enslaving or executing them. Some thought it was a trick. Others believed humans were weak for showing mercy to their enemies. The war crimes trials began 6 months after the surrender. The proceedings were held on New Eden, in a special courthouse built on the glassed ruins of the old colony. Every session was broadcast throughout the galaxy, showing exactly what had happened to the peaceful farming world. Admiral Zektar was the first to face trial. He sat in the defendant's chair, listening as prosecutors read the charges against him. Genocide, crimes against humanity, murder of civilians, and violations of galactic law. The evidence was overwhelming, his own communications ordering the destruction of New Eden. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" the human judge asked. Zektar looked around the courtroom, seeing the faces of human survivors and alien observers. For the first time in his life, he understood the weight of his actions. "I thought we were dealing with a threat to galactic order. I never considered that the people on New Eden were individuals with families and dreams. I was wrong." The trial lasted 3 weeks. When it was over, Zektar was sentenced to life imprisonment on a prison colony in human space. He would spend the rest of his life thinking about the consequences of treating other species as expendable. But the trials raised difficult questions about justice and revenge. Some humans wanted every Kythera military officer executed. Others argued for mercy and rehabilitation. The debate split human society and forced them to examine what kind of people they wanted to be. President Chen addressed the nation from the memorial garden built where Eden City had once stood. Behind her, 2 million white stones marked the graves of those who had died in the attack. Each stone bore a name, an age, and a brief description of the person's life. "We fought this war for justice," she said. "Not for revenge, not for conquest, but for justice. We've achieved that goal. The people responsible for New Eden have been punished. The threat to human colonies has been eliminated. Now we must decide what comes next." The decision wasn't easy. Some politicians wanted to maintain military control over former Kythera worlds indefinitely. Others pushed for immediate withdrawal. Military leaders worried about security threats. Civilians demanded that tax money stop being spent on occupying alien worlds. Admiral Rodriguez found herself in an unexpected position. She had commanded the war that destroyed the Kythera Empire, but now she was being asked to help rebuild it as something better. The skills that made her an excellent military commander didn't necessarily translate to governing civilian populations. "I'm a soldier, not a politician," she told President Chen during one of their weekly conferences. "I can destroy enemy fleets, but I don't know how to run schools or hospitals or democratic elections." Chen nodded. "None of us know how to do this. We're making it up as we go along, but that's better than leaving these worlds in chaos." The human administration of former Kythera territory became a massive experiment in interspecies governance. Human advisors worked with local civilian leaders to establish democratic institutions. Schools were built to teach Kythera children about concepts like individual rights and elected government. Some worlds adapted quickly to human-style democracy. Others struggled with the idea that leaders should serve the people, rather than the other way around. A few rejected human influence entirely, and had to be left under military administration until they were ready for self-government. The galaxy watched these developments with fascination and concern. Humanity had demonstrated their military power, but how they used their victory would determine their place in the galactic community. Would they become tyrants like the Kythera, or would they prove worthy of the power they had claimed? The answer came gradually through thousands of small actions. Human engineers rebuilt infrastructure on war-damaged worlds. Human doctors provided medical care without regard to species or political loyalty. Human teachers educated alien children alongside human colonists. The Altarian Federation was the first major power to recognize humanity's new status. Ambassador Velron traveled to Earth to sign a formal alliance treaty with President Chen. "Your people have shown that power and responsibility can coexist," he told her. The Altarians would be honored to call humanity our allies. Similar treaties followed. The Trellan Empire, which had once considered humans to be minor players in galactic politics, now sought their partnership. The peaceful Centauri Republic asked for human protection against aggressive neighbors. Even former Cathara trading partners requested human mediation in their disputes. But the most important changes were happening on the former Cathara worlds themselves. On the planet Veltara, the first democratic elections in planetary history were held 2 years after the war's end. Candidates from multiple species competed for office, promising to serve all citizens regardless of their origin. On Zolveth, human advisors helped establish the galaxy's first interspecies university, where young beings from dozens of different worlds could study together. The school's motto was simple: learning from our differences. And on Kethmore, the former fortress world became a center for peace studies. The massive military installations were converted into research facilities dedicated to preventing future wars. Students came from across the galaxy to study conflict resolution and diplomatic theory. The transformation wasn't complete or perfect. Some former Cathara worlds remained unstable, a few human administrators abused their power, and had to be removed. Terrorist groups occasionally launched attacks against human targets or local governments. But the overall trend was clear. The worlds that had once been part of a militaristic empire were becoming something new and better. Democracy was taking root. Individual rights were being protected. Different species were learning to live together as equals. 5 years after the war's end, President Chen returned to New Eden for the memorial service that marked the anniversary of the colony's destruction. The planet was still a wasteland, but the memorial garden had grown into a beautiful park where people from across the galaxy came to remember the cost of hatred and violence. She stood before the 2 million white stones, each one representing a life cut short by Cathara aggression. But she also looked up at the ships in orbit, vessels from dozens of species working together to protect the memorial and the values it represented. "We didn't fight this war to become conquerors," she told the assembled crowd. "We fought it to ensure that no other world would suffer New Eden's fate. Today I can say we've succeeded. The galaxy is safer, more just and more peaceful because of the sacrifices made here." Admiral Rodriguez, now retired from active duty, stood in the crowd listening to the president's speech. She thought about the thousands of young people who had died in the war, and the millions more who had been saved by their sacrifice. The war had been terrible but necessary. After the ceremony, she walked among the memorial stones, reading the names and ages of the dead. She stopped at one stone in particular,